Did you get lost on your way to the janitor's closet? Professor Catherine Whitman's voice cuts through Riverside University's chemistry lecture. She holds up Damon Wright's transfer application, her lip curled in disgust. East Side Community College? Really? Without warning, she drops his application on the marble floor. Her designer heel comes down hard, grinding the papers under her shoe like she's crushing an insect. 200 students watch in shock. Some pull out phones already filming. Damon sits frozen in the back row, his worn backpack clutched against his chest, feeling the heat of every stare. Perhaps, Professor Whitman continues, brushing imaginary dust from her hands, you'd be more comfortable cleaning our lab equipment instead of pretending to understand chemistry. The privileged students exchange knowing smirks. Several openly laugh. Have you ever been humiliated so publicly that your dreams felt like they were dying in real time? This is the annual chemistry challenge at Riverside University, where community college students compete for the Holy Grail, a full scholarship transfer to one of California's most prestigious chemistry programs. The rules seem straightforward enough. 3 rounds of increasingly difficult chemical problem solving, mechanism prediction, and synthesis design. Only the top performer walks away with a future. But the game is rigged from the start. Professor Catherine Whitman, department head for 15 years with a Harvard PhD and 3 published textbooks, has hand-selected 5 pre-approved candidates, all from elite preparatory programs, all white, all from families wealthy enough to donate new lab equipment. Their names were whispered in faculty meetings months ago, their acceptance letters practically pre-written. Then there's Damon Wright, the mandatory diversity slot that university policy requires but nobody actually wants filled. The lecture hall buzzes with anticipation as news crews set up cameras and parents clutch their designer handbags. This isn't just any competition. It's being filmed for the university's promotional materials. Local reporters sense a story brewing. Social media accounts are already live streaming. The stakes couldn't be more public. Damon studies the other competitors from his corner seat. There's Bradley Ashworth, whose father owns 3 pharmaceutical companies. Madison Sinclair, whose prep school chemistry lab has better equipment than most universities. Trevor Knox, who's been tutored by Nobel Prize winners since middle school. Sarah Wellington, whose trust fund could probably buy the entire chemistry department. They sit in the front row like they own the place, because in many ways they do. Damon's story is different. Raised by a single mother who cleaned office buildings at night, scrubbing floors while he studied by fluorescent lights in empty hallways. His father died when he was 12, leaving behind only medical bills and a worn copy of Organic Chemistry that Damon still carries everywhere. His gift revealed itself quietly. In high school, he corrected his teacher's equation balancing during a lecture on combustion reactions. Instead of praise, he got detention and a lecture about knowing your place. His guidance counselor steered him toward trade schools, insisting college wasn't realistic for someone from his neighborhood. Now he works nights as a janitor at the same community college where he studies chemistry during the day. While his classmates sleep, he's emptying trash cans and mopping floors. While they party on weekends, he's in empty classrooms teaching himself advanced organic synthesis from textbooks older than he is. His worn backpack tells the story, filled with chemistry books held together by tape, notebooks with margins packed full of reaction mechanisms he's memorized, and a calculator that needs to be hit twice before it turns on. But hidden in those dog-eared pages is a genius that even he doesn't fully understand yet. Professor Whitman represents everything he's fighting against. She sees herself as a guardian of academic standards, convinced that rigorous chemistry requires the proper breeding that only comes from the right schools, the right neighborhoods, the right skin color. To her, Damon isn't just an outsider. He's proof that the system is being corrupted by political correctness. She's not entirely wrong about her credentials. Her research on catalytic processes revolutionized pharmaceutical manufacturing. Her textbooks are used in universities worldwide. When she speaks about molecular orbital theory, Nobel laureates listen. This isn't a cartoon villain. She's a brilliant woman who genuinely believes she's protecting academic integrity. But brilliance and prejudice often share the same mind. As the competition begins, subtle signs of Damon's hidden abilities start showing. He notices immediately that the molecular structure drawn on the whiteboard has an impossible bond angle. His test booklet margins fill unconsciously with advanced reaction mechanisms most graduate students would struggle to understand. When Professor Whitman explains stereochemistry, he quietly spots the error in her chirality assignment. The other students gossip loudly enough for him to hear. Why is he even here? Affirmative action gone crazy. My dad's going to hear about this. They treat him like an unwelcome guest at their private party. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sits quietly in the back, the visiting MIT professor serving as competition judge. Unlike the others, she watches Damon with curious eyes. Something about his stillness, his intense focus, reminds her of herself 30 years ago when she was the only Latina in her graduate chemistry program. The cameras are rolling. The stakes are set. 200 students fill every seat, phones ready to capture whatever happens next. This isn't just about a scholarship anymore. It's about who belongs in the sacred halls of higher education. What happens when an unstoppable force of hidden genius meets an immovable wall of institutional prejudice? Professor Whitman's voice slices through the murmur of anticipation like a scalpel through tissue. We'll begin with a simple warm-up problem. Organic reaction prediction. She turns to the whiteboard, her marker squeaking as she draws a moderately complex molecular structure with confident strokes. The molecule looks innocent enough, a cyclohexene ring with several functional groups attached. But Damon's trained eye immediately spots the trap hidden in plain sight. Mr. Wright, Professor Whitman announces, her voice dripping with theatrical sweetness, since you're our special guest from East Side Community College, why don't you show us exactly what passes for chemistry education in your neighborhood? The room falls silent except for the soft whir of news cameras zooming in. 200 pairs of eyes swivel toward Damon like spotlights. Some students lean forward eagerly, anticipating a spectacular failure. Others pull out their phones, sensing viral content in the making. Bradley Ashworth stage whispers loud enough for everyone to hear. This should be entertaining. Madison Sinclair giggles behind her manicured hand. The privileged students exchange knowing looks. They've seen this movie before, and they know how it ends. Professor Whitman taps her marker against the board impatiently. Well, we don't have all day, unless, of course, you need to call someone for help. More snickers ripple through the audience. Damon's heart hammers against his ribs. His palms are sweating, making his worn notebook slippery in his grip. Every instinct screams at him to play it safe, give a partial answer, avoid the humiliation that seems inevitable. This is the moment where most people would fold, where common sense would whisper, don't make a scene, don't draw attention. Just give them what they expect and maybe you can slip away with some dignity intact. But something deeper than fear stirs in Damon's chest. Maybe it's the memory of his father's chemistry book, the one constant in his chaotic childhood. Maybe it's thinking about his sister, watching from home, believing her big brother can do anything. Maybe it's pure, stubborn pride. He stands up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seems to echo forever. The camera operators adjust their angles, sensing drama. The room holds its breath. I'll provide the complete mechanism and predict all products, including stereochemistry, Damon says quietly, his voice steadier than he feels. Professor Whitman's eyebrows shoot up in mock surprise. Oh my. The complete mechanism? How ambitious. She gestures grandly toward the board. By all means, enlighten us. As Damon walks down the aisle toward the whiteboard, conversations buzz around him like angry wasps. Is he serious? This is going to be painful to watch. Someone should stop this before it gets embarrassing. The privileged students watch with barely concealed glee. They've never seen someone so thoroughly outmatched before, and they're settling in for the show. Dr. Rodriguez shifts forward in her seat, her pen poised over her evaluation sheet. Something in Damon's quiet confidence reminds her of the greatest chemists she's known, the ones who see patterns others miss. Damon reaches the board and picks up a fresh marker. Just as he's about to start writing, the marker makes a faint scratching sound, nearly dry. He tries again. Nothing but pale, broken lines. Professor Whitman smiles coldly. Equipment problems already? Perhaps that's a sign. The room erupts in nervous laughter. Someone shouts, "Maybe the universe is trying to tell you something." More laughter follows, building to a crescendo of mockery. Damon calmly reaches for another marker from the tray. This one works. He turns to face the board, the weight of 200 stares pressing down on his shoulders like a physical force. The molecular structure looks back at him, challenging him to prove he belongs here. Will genius shine, or will prejudice claim another victim in front of rolling cameras? Damon stares at the molecular structure for exactly 30 seconds. The room grows restless. Students shift in their seats. Someone coughs. A camera operator zooms in on his face, capturing the intensity of his concentration. Then he speaks, his voice cutting through the expectant silence like a blade. Professor Whitman, I think there might be a small issue with the stereochemistry here. The words hit the lecture hall like a physical shock wave. Audible gasps echo from multiple directions. Students freeze mid-whisper. Even the news cameras seem to pause in disbelief. No one questions Professor Whitman's chemistry, ever. Her face flushes crimson, the color spreading from her neck upward like spilled wine on white fabric. Excuse me? Her voice carries the dangerous edge of authority being challenged. The privileged students exchange panicked glances. Bradley Ashworth's mouth hangs open. Madison Sinclair stops filing her nails mid-stroke. This isn't the script they expected. The entertainment was supposed to be Damon's humiliation, not their professor being corrected by someone from a community college. But Damon continues, his voice gaining confidence with each word. The reagent you've drawn here, sodium borohydride and methanol, it's going to attack from the less hindered face of the carbonyl. He points to the molecular structure with steady fingers, his explanation simple enough for the undergraduate audience to follow. But look at this bulky tert-butyl group positioned right here. His marker circles the offending substituent. It's going to block the approach from this side completely, so the hydride will have to come in from underneath, giving us the opposite stereoisomer than what you've drawn as the product. The room has gone dead silent. You could hear a pin drop in the chemistry lab 3 floors down. Professor Whitman's eyes darted frantically between the board and her notes. She checks her molecular models twice, her hands shaking slightly as she manipulates the plastic atoms. The seconds stretch like hours while 200 students and multiple cameras wait for her response. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, That's correct." The admission seems to physically pain her. Her authority, built over 15 years of departmental dominance, cracks like glass under pressure. But Damon isn't finished. With growing confidence, he draws the correct stereochemical outcome on the board. His curved arrows showing electron movement are elegant and precise, the kind of mechanism drawing that graduate students spend months learning to perfect. The actual product should have this configuration, he explains, his marker moving with surgical precision. R configuration at this stereo center, not S configuration like the original drawing showed. Dr. Rodriguez leans forward, her evaluation sheet forgotten. She's watching something remarkable unfold. A mind that doesn't just memorize chemistry but truly understands it at a molecular level. The ripple effects spread through the room like wildfire. Students who were filming Damon's expected failure are now capturing something entirely different. Social media notifications start buzzing. The hashtag chemistry challenge begins trending locally within minutes. Professor Whitman stands frozen at the board, her carefully constructed authority crumbling in real time. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her trap question, designed to eliminate Damon quickly and quietly, has backfired spectacularly. The other competitors look genuinely shaken. Bradley Ashworth's face has gone pale. These aren't stupid students. They recognize advanced chemistry when they see it. And they're beginning to realize that their guaranteed victory might not be so guaranteed after all. Furthermore, Damon continues, his confidence building with each word, if we wanted the stereoisomer you originally drew, we'd need to use L-selectride instead of sodium borohydride. The bulky alkoxide groups would coordinate to the carbonyl from the top face, directing the hydride delivery to give the S configuration. Now he's showing off, but in the most educational way possible. The chemistry is sound, the explanation clear, and the implications devastating to every assumption in the room. Someone in the audience whispers loudly enough to be heard, "Holy shit, he's actually right." Professor Whitman's lips move silently as she works through the mechanism in her head, desperately searching for an error she can exploit. But there isn't one. Damon's analysis is flawless. The news reporter in the back row gestures frantically to her cameraman, recognizing that they're witnessing something special. This isn't just a feel-good underdog story anymore. This is a genuine reversal of academic power dynamics playing out in real time. Dr. Rodriguez begins taking detailed notes, her pen moving rapidly across the evaluation sheet. She's seen thousands of chemistry students over her career, but this level of intuitive understanding is rare even among graduate students. The room buzzes with a new energy. Students are no longer watching for entertainment. They're witnessing something that might change how they think about intelligence, education, and who deserves to be taken seriously. Professor Whitman clears her throat, struggling to regain control of her classroom. "That was adequate," she manages, though her voice lacks its earlier bite. But the damage is done. The seed of doubt has been planted. If Damon can spot errors in problems designed to trip him up, what else might he be capable of? The privileged students no longer look quite so smug. The cameras continue rolling, social media continues buzzing, and somewhere in the back of everyone's mind, a question begins forming. What happens when someone everyone underestimated turns out to be the smartest person in the room? Professor Whitman's jaw tightens like a steel trap snapping shut. The polite mask she's worn for decades slides away, revealing something harder underneath. She's been publicly corrected by a community college student, and her 15 years of academic authority are cracking like ice in spring. "Well, Mr. Wright," she says, her voice dripping with barely controlled venom, "since you found that problem so elementary, let's skip ahead, shall we?" She turns to her computer, her fingers stabbing at the keyboard with more force than necessary. The projector screen flickers, and a new molecular structure appears, something that makes several students gasp audibly. We'll bypass the intermediate round entirely and move directly to graduate-level synthetic chemistry. The structure on screen looks like a chemical nightmare, a complex natural product with multiple rings, stereocenters scattered like landmines, and functional groups that seem to defy conventional synthesis approaches. Even the privileged students look genuinely concerned for the first time. Bradley Ashworth leans over to Madison Sinclair. "That's a PhD-level problem. Level 2. My private tutor wouldn't even attempt that without 6 months of preparation." Professor Whitman has abandoned her own carefully planned curriculum, throwing away months of preparation just to humiliate one student. The desperation is becoming obvious to everyone watching. "Oh, and since this is such an important evaluation," she continues with false sweetness, "I'll be calling in additional expert judges." 2 graduate teaching assistants materialize at her gesture, clearly her former students, clearly biased, clearly there to ensure the correct outcome. The playing field tilts even further away from fairness. The public pressure intensifies like a gathering storm. The local news reporter begins broadcasting live, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're witnessing an unprecedented challenge at Riverside University, where academic standards and social justice appear to be colliding in real time." Social media explodes. #ChemChallenge starts trending beyond Los Angeles. Posts flood in from chemistry professors across the country, some supporting the rigorous standards, others questioning the sudden rule changes. The university dean arrives unexpectedly, drawn by reports of the unusual competition. Her presence adds another layer of pressure. Now, institutional reputation hangs in the balance alongside individual futures. Parents of the privileged students cluster near the front, their designer clothes and expensive watches catching the camera lights. Mrs. Ashworth whispers frantically into her phone. "This wasn't supposed to happen. Bradley was guaranteed admission." But something shifts in the room's energy as Damon studies the impossible molecule. Other students begin watching him with genuine curiosity rather than anticipated schadenfreude. His quiet confidence in the face of obvious intimidation resonates with anyone who's ever been underestimated. Dr. Rodriguez observes the unfolding drama with growing concern. She's seen academic politics before, but rarely this blatant, rarely this public. Her evaluation sheet remains untouched as she watches the integrity of the competition dissolve in real time. Damon's internal struggle plays out in the subtle tension of his shoulders, the way his fingers grip his worn notebook. Voiceover reveals his thoughts. "I've studied these reactions in secret, teaching myself from textbooks that cost more than my family's grocery budget. But I've never had formal instruction, never had access to proper lab equipment. What if there's something fundamental I'm missing? What if she's right about people like me?" The weight of representation settles on his shoulders like a lead blanket. He's no longer just fighting for his own future. He's carrying the hopes of every student who's been told they don't belong, every young person whose potential has been dismissed because of their zip code or skin color. During a brief recess, Dr. Rodriguez approaches quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been watching your work, Damon. Don't let anyone convince you that your mind isn't sharp enough. Chemistry doesn't care about your address or your bank account. Molecules don't see color." Her words strike like lightning, illuminating something fundamental that Damon had almost forgotten. Science is the ultimate meritocracy. Truth doesn't require permission or pedigree. The impossible challenge looms on the screen, a total synthesis problem that would normally require months of research, access to specialized databases, and guidance from professors who've spent decades in the field. Multiple plot threads weave together like complex reaction pathways. Will Damon attempt the synthesis that even graduate students fear? How will the obviously biased judges evaluate his work? What's Professor Whitman's real endgame? Is this about maintaining standards or protecting privilege? Most importantly, are the other students beginning to root for the underdog, or will institutional pressure force them to maintain the status quo? The room buzzes with whispered conversations as everyone realizes they're witnessing something unprecedented. The cameras continue rolling, social media continues exploding, and somewhere in the gathering storm of academic politics and public scrutiny, a young man from the wrong side of town prepares to attempt the impossible. Can raw talent triumph over institutional bias when the entire world is watching? The clock on the wall ticks like a time bomb, 20 minutes to solve what normally takes graduate students months to even approach. Damon approaches the whiteboard with the measured steps of someone walking to their own execution, or their coronation. The complex natural product stares back at him from the projection screen like a molecular monster. Multiple rings twisted together in impossible geometries. 7 stereo centers that need perfect control. Functional groups that seem to actively hate each other. But then something remarkable happens. Mini-win. Damon's eyes scan the structure for less than 30 seconds before his face lights up with recognition. "This is a modified taxane framework," he murmurs, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "I recognize this from a 2019 Nature paper on anti-cancer compounds." His marker moves confidently across the board, sketching the basic skeleton in clean, elegant lines. The privileged students exchange worried glances. That level of literature knowledge isn't supposed to come from community college. Mini loss. But as he begins planning his retro-synthetic approach, his marker starts running dry again. The lines become faint, broken. Professor Whitman's smile returns like a predator scenting weakness. Equipment problems again, Mr. Wright? Perhaps this is nature's way of telling you to know your limits. Scattered laughter ripples through the room, though it sounds less confident than before. Mini-win. Damon calmly replaces the marker and pivots to an entirely different synthetic strategy. Instead of the traditional approach, he starts sketching a biomimetic pathway, the route nature itself might use to build the molecule. His technique is elegant, unconventional, and utterly brilliant. If we think about how plants actually synthesize these compounds, he explains to the captivated audience, we can use their enzymatic logic, but with synthetic catalysts. Dr. Rodriguez's pen moves frantically across her notepad. This isn't textbook regurgitation. This is genuine chemical intuition. Mini loss. One of the graduate teaching assistants interrupts aggressively. Your protecting group strategy won't work. That hydroxyl will interfere with the cyclization. His tone drips with condescension, clearly trying to rattle Damon's confidence. Mini-win. Damon doesn't even pause. Actually, if we use a benzyl protecting group instead of acetyl, the PEEP interactions will actually stabilize the transition state and accelerate the cyclization. He references a 2021 JAX paper from memory, complete with author names and reaction conditions. The graduate student's face goes red. He checks his phone frantically, trying to verify the citation. The room watches in fascination as the power dynamic continues to flip. Obstacle cascade. The markers keep failing at crucial moments, forcing Damon to constantly adapt his presentation style. Professor Whitman accidentally bumps the projector, shifting the molecular structure just as he's explaining a critical stereochemical relationship. The time limit gets mysteriously reduced from 20 to 15 minutes. Administrative adjustment, Professor Whitman announces with false authority. Crowd noise becomes increasingly distracting as word spreads on social media. Students outside press against the windows, trying to glimpse the unprecedented showdown. The buzz of notifications fills the air like electronic locusts. Trevor Knox, one of the privileged students, loudly questions whether Damon might have seen this exact problem before. My prep school has connections to major pharmaceutical companies. We would have heard if someone was teaching graduate-level synthesis at community colleges. Competence reveal number 2. Despite the mounting obstacles, Damon demonstrates mastery that leaves even skeptics speechless. Retrosynthetic analysis. He breaks the impossible molecule into manageable building blocks with the precision of a master architect, identifying key disconnections that others miss entirely. Stereochemical control. His understanding of three-dimensional molecular geometry is intuitive, almost supernatural. He predicts reaction outcomes that require sophisticated computer modeling to verify. Protecting group strategy. He designs a sequence of temporary molecular modifications that protect vulnerable sites while allowing targeted reactions to proceed, chess moves planned 15 steps ahead. Biomimetic approach. Instead of fighting against chemical reactivity, he harnesses the same strategies that billions of years of evolution have perfected. Literature. Integration. He weaves together research from multiple cutting-edge papers, creating connections that reveal deep understanding rather than mere memorization. Social pressure cooker. The room transforms into a digital coliseum. Live tweets flood in faster than anyone can read. Community college student destroying Harvard PhD in real time. Counter tweets from skeptics. No way this is real. Someone's feeding him answers. Parents of privileged students demand investigations. Threats of lawsuits flying like academic warfare. Mrs. Sinclair corners the dean, her voice shrill with panic. This is clearly orchestrated to make our children look bad. The university PR team arrives in force, unsure whether to promote or suppress the story. Their crisis management training never covered viral academic showdowns. But something beautiful emerges from the chaos. Students throughout the room begin choosing sides based not on social status, but on pure intellectual appreciation. Even some privileged students find themselves secretly rooting for Damon, recognizing authentic genius when they see it. Voiceover reveals the deeper stakes. This wasn't just about chemistry anymore. Every equation on that board represented a young person who'd been told they weren't smart enough. Every reaction mechanism stood for potential dismissal because of zip codes and skin color. Damon wasn't just solving a synthesis problem. He was rewriting the story of who gets to be brilliant. Crowd reactions. Cascade. Chemistry professors from UCLA and Caltech start appearing, drawn by social media reports. Graduate students skip their own classes to witness history. The audience swells beyond the lecture hall's capacity. Television news crews arrive from 3 different networks. The hashtag #HatChemGenius spreads beyond academia into mainstream social media. Preparation montage within chaos. Despite the mounting pressure, Damon's work grows more sophisticated by the minute. His hand moves across the whiteboard with increasing confidence, each molecular structure more elegant than the last. His synthesis route evolves from good to brilliant to revolutionary. Professor Whitman's expression shifts from confidence to concern to barely concealed panic as she realizes what's happening. Dr. Rodriguez abandons all pretense of neutral evaluation, openly taking detailed notes that read more like scientific documentation than competition scoring. The molecular masterpiece taking shape on the whiteboard represents more than just chemical knowledge. It's proof that excellence can emerge from anywhere, that genius doesn't require privilege, that the future belongs to those brave enough to solve impossible problems. Will this extraordinary display of chemical mastery be enough to overcome institutional bias? Or are there even greater obstacles ahead? Just as Damon puts the finishing touches on his elegant synthetic pathway, Professor Whitman's voice cuts through the room like a scalpel through flesh. "I'm afraid there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here." The words hit the audience like a physical blow. Conversations die mid-sentence. Cameras zoom in on her face, capturing the cold satisfaction spreading across her features like spilled acid. This particular target molecule was deliberately chosen because it has never been successfully synthesized by anyone, anywhere in the world. Yet her voice carries the authority of someone delivering a death sentence. It represents one of chemistry's great unsolved challenges. The room erupts in confused murmurs. Students exchange bewildered glances. Even the privileged competitors look uncomfortable, realizing they've been used as unwitting props in an elaborate setup. This was a test of intellectual humility, Professor Whitman continues, her words measured and merciless. The ability to recognize when a problem exceeds your capabilities. To admit defeat gracefully, rather than embarrass yourself with impossible claims. Bradley Ashworth whispers to Madison Sinclair, "She never told us it was unsolvable. We could have been next." The realization that they're all expendable pieces in her game sends chills through the privileged ranks. But Damon doesn't flinch. He stands at the whiteboard like a statue, his marker still poised above the complex synthetic scheme he's constructed. His voice, when it comes, is steady as stone. "With respect, Professor Whitman, I believe there might be a viable synthetic route. It requires a non-traditional approach, but I think it's possible." The audacity takes everyone's breath away. He's not just disagreeing with a Harvard PhD. He's claiming he can solve what she's declared impossible. Professor Whitman's mask slips completely. "Mr. Wright, I've spent the last 5 years researching this exact molecular target as part of a collaborative effort with 3 pharmaceutical companies. Teams of PhD chemists with unlimited budgets have failed. There is no synthesis. Sometimes intellectual maturity means accepting your limitations." Her words hang in the air like a challenge thrown down at high noon. The stakes have exploded beyond anyone's imagination. This isn't about solving a difficult problem anymore. It's about proving that institutional authority can be wrong, that declared impossibilities might just be failures of imagination. Dr. Rodriguez speaks up, her voice cutting through the tension. Perhaps we should let him complete his proposal before drawing final conclusions. The room holds its breath. News cameras focus with laser intensity. Social media notifications buzz like angry hornets. Everyone realizes they're witnessing a moment that will be remembered long after the competition ends. Can a community college student succeed where teams of PhD researchers have failed? Or is Professor Whitman about to deliver the most devastating lesson in humility ever captured on camera? The weight of the impossible challenge crashes down on Damon like a collapsing building. 5 years of professional research teams, unlimited pharmaceutical budgets, PhD chemists who've forgotten more chemistry than he's ever learned, all defeated by the same molecule he's claiming he can synthesize. In his desperate rush to prove Professor Whitman wrong, Damon makes a critical error that will haunt him for the rest of his life. His hand trembles slightly as he draws the key cyclization step, the molecular transformation that should elegantly close the ring system and create the target structure. But under the crushing pressure of 200 stares, rolling cameras, and the weight of representing every underestimated student in America, his mind betrays him. He draws the stereochemistry wrong. Not just wrong, catastrophically, fundamentally, impossibly wrong. The bond that should point upward in space points downward. The molecular geometry that should enable the reaction instead destroys it completely. The error cascades through his entire synthetic plan like a chemical virus, invalidating everything he's built. Professor Whitman spots the mistake within seconds, her predator's instincts homing in on weakness with surgical precision. "Class," she announces, her voice thick with vindicated satisfaction. "Observe what happens when ambition exceeds knowledge." She approaches the board like a general surveying a conquered battlefield. Her red marker circles Damon's error with deliberate theatrical cruelty. The crimson line around his mistake looks like blood on white snow. This stereochemical impossibility invalidates your entire approach. The ring strain would be so severe that the molecule would literally tear itself apart. Her voice carries the weight of absolute authority. This is precisely why we have prerequisites, proper academic pathways, and rigorous admission standards. The room shifts like sand in an earthquake. Students who were secretly rooting for Damon now look embarrassed for him, their faces flushed with secondhand shame. The viral social media momentum reverses direction with brutal speed. New tweets flood the timeline. Maybe the professor was right all along. Kid got in over his head. This is painful to watch. The privileged students exchange knowing looks that say everything without words. The natural order has been restored. The interloper has been exposed. Their superiority has been confirmed by Damon's public failure. Madison Sinclair actually giggles behind her manicured hand, the sound carrying across the silent room like breaking glass. Damon's internal world collapses like a house of cards. Voiceover reveals the devastating thoughts racing through his mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe all those years of studying alone, all those nights working by lamplight in empty classrooms, maybe it was all just a delusion. Maybe people like me really don't have what it takes. His hands shake visibly now. When he tries to speak, his voice cracks like a 13-year-old boy's, betraying the insecure teenager hiding beneath all that chemical knowledge. For the first time since entering the room, he looks exactly like what Professor Whitman always claimed he was, a kid from the wrong neighborhood, out of his depth, drowning in waters too deep for him. The deeper wound comes next, delivered with surgical precision. "Mr. Wright," Professor Whitman says, her voice softer now but somehow more cruel, "there's no shame in recognizing your proper level. Perhaps you'd be happier in our general chemistry program, where the expectations are more appropriate to your background." The words hit harder than any physical blow could. They carry the weight of every teacher who'd dismissed his potential, every guidance counselor who'd steered him away from his dreams, every voice that had whispered, he wasn't good enough. Damon sets the red-stained marker down on the board's ledge with infinite care, like he's placing a funeral flower on a grave. He turns away from his ruined masterpiece, his shoulders sagging under the weight of public humiliation. The cameras continue rolling, documenting his walk of shame. News crews sense the story shifting beneath them. Social media prepares for a very different kind of viral moment. Then, just as Damon reaches his seat and the room begins to buzz with post-mortem whispers, Dr. Rodriguez stands up. "Damon," she says quietly, but her voice carries to every corner of the room. "What if the error isn't in your strategy? What if your approach is actually revolutionary and you just made a simple stereochemical mistake under pressure? Will this spark be enough to reignite a dream, or has the damage already been done?" Dr. Rodriguez's words hit Damon like lightning striking a dead tree, bringing it back to life. He stops mid-stride, his hand frozen on his backpack strap. The room holds its breath as he slowly turns back toward the whiteboard. For 30 seconds that feel like eternity, he stares at his work with the intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. His eyes trace every bond, every arrow, every stereo center. Then, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds, understanding dawns on his face. "The stereochemistry," he whispers, then louder, "It's just the stereochemistry." Professor Whitman's confident smile falters like a candle in the wind. "Mr. Wright, your entire approach is fundamentally—" "No." Damon's voice cuts through her dismissal with quiet authority. "My retrosynthetic strategy is correct. I just drew one bond wrong." He walks back to the board with renewed purpose, each step more confident than the last. The cameras track his movement like predators following prey, except now they're not sure who's the hunter and who's the hunted. Picking up a fresh marker, Damon erases his stereochemical error with surgical precision. His hand doesn't shake now. His voice doesn't crack. When he redraws the critical bond with the correct three-dimensional orientation, the entire synthetic pathway transforms from impossible to inevitable. The corrected approach unfolds. "The issue with previous synthetic attempts," Damon begins, his explanation clear enough for undergraduates but sophisticated enough to impress PhD chemists, "was assuming this cyclization had to be thermal. But if we use photochemical activation with visible light catalysis, the stereochemistry actually works in our favor." His marker moves across the board like a conductor's baton, orchestrating molecular transformations with elegant precision. Competence reveal number 3, the grand payoff, stereochemical mastery. He fixes the ring closure with perfect three-dimensional visualization, showing how the corrected geometry enables rather than prevents the crucial bond formation. Innovative strategy. His biomimetic approach doesn't fight against chemical reactivity. It harnesses the same evolutionary logic that nature perfected over millions of years. Cutting-edge integration. He references photoredox catalysis methodology from 2023 papers, demonstrating not just knowledge, but understanding of the field's bleeding edge. Problem-solving brilliance. Each obstacle that stopped previous research teams becomes a stepping stone in his pathway, turned from liability to advantage through creative thinking. Synthetic artistry. The final route he presents is more than just viable. It's elegant, efficient, and genuinely innovative. Professor Whitman's face goes through a spectrum of emotions like a chemical indicator changing colors. She checks her phone frantically, searching chemical databases for any flaw she can exploit. Her fingers fly across PubMed, SciFinder, Reaxys, every resource available to professional chemists. But there's nothing there. No contradictory data, no fatal flaws, just the growing, terrible realization that she's been intellectually outmaneuvered by the student she tried to destroy. The moment of truth. Damon completes his corrected synthesis and steps back, his work spread across the whiteboard like a molecular masterpiece. The pathway is clean, logical, and beautiful in the way that only truly great chemistry can be. The room falls into cathedral silence. Even the social media notifications seem to pause in respect. Professor Whitman approaches the board like a condemned woman walking to the gallows. She studies every reaction, every mechanism, every stereochemical transformation with the desperation of someone searching for salvation that doesn't exist. Minutes pass. The audience barely breathes. News cameras capture every second of her verification process, the mounting tension visible in her increasingly rigid posture. The 3 golden beats. Beat 1, pointing out the subtle flaw. Professor Whitman, Damon says with quiet confidence, the breakthrough is recognizing that previous approaches failed because they treated this as a thermal cyclization problem. But recent advances in photoredox catalysis, specifically Macmillan's 2023 work on visible light activation, provide an entirely different pathway. His explanation is patient, educational, devastating in its clarity. Beat 2. Public reversal. I understand why this molecule seemed impossible to synthesize. Traditional methods create insurmountable ring strain. But if we think like nature thinks, using cascade reactions triggered by light instead of heat, the stereochemistry actually guides us toward success instead of failure. He traces the reaction pathway with his finger, showing how each step flows naturally into the next, like water finding its way downhill. Beat 3. The authorities' reluctant admission. Professor Whitman's voice, when it finally comes, is barely above a whisper. The synthesis appears to be viable. The words seem to physically pain her, extracted like a confession under torture. But the room demands more. 200 students, news cameras, social media audiences, they all sense that history requires a complete acknowledgement. Louder, forced by the weight of undeniable evidence and public scrutiny. Mr. Wright's synthetic route is not only feasible, it's genuinely innovative. Crowd eruption. The silence shatters like glass hitting concrete. Explosive applause erupts from every corner of the room, building to a crescendo that seems to shake the building's foundations. Students leap to their feet, phones recording frantically. Even some of the privileged competitors find themselves clapping despite everything they've been taught about social hierarchy and academic gatekeeping. Dr. Rodriguez openly applauds, her evaluation sheet forgotten as she witnesses something that will reshape how she thinks about talent and potential. News crews scramble to capture reaction shots. The hashtag #ChemGenius explodes across social media platforms, spreading beyond academic circles into mainstream consciousness. Status. Flip complete. The power dynamic in the room has been completely, irreversibly reversed. Professor Whitman, the supposed guardian of chemical knowledge, has been intellectually dismantled by the student she tried to humiliate. The synthesis on the whiteboard stands as more than just chemistry. It's proof that brilliance doesn't require pedigree, that innovation can emerge from anywhere, that the future belongs to those brave enough to attempt the impossible. Voiceover. In chemistry, truth has no respect for prejudice. An elegant synthesis doesn't ask about your zip code, your parents' income, or the color of your skin. It only cares whether your ideas can transform the impossible into the inevitable. Cry, shock, rewatch. Moment number 2. The moment when Professor Whitman admits Damon's route is genuinely innovative, her voice breaking on words that represent the complete collapse of everything she believed about intellectual hierarchy. The applause continues, but everyone knows this is just the beginning. The real question isn't whether Damon has won. It's what happens next in a world where the impossible has just become possible. What revelations await in the aftermath of the academic revolution? As the thunderous applause begins to fade, Dr. Rodriguez rises from her seat with the deliberate gravity of someone about to detonate a bomb. Her voice cuts through the celebration like a surgeon's scalpel. Professor Whitman, I need to inform the competition committee of something critical. The room falls silent so quickly it's almost violent. Cameras swing toward her like artillery pieces finding their target. Every phone in the audience points in her direction, sensing that the story isn't over. This molecular target, the one you declared impossible to synthesize, was successfully prepared 18 months ago by Professor Yamamoto's team at Tokyo University. Their work was published in Nature Chemistry with a 15-step synthetic route. The words hit Professor Whitman like physical blows. Her face drains of color so completely she looks like a corpse standing upright. Furthermore, Dr. Rodriguez continues with prosecutorial precision, as a tenured chemistry professor and department head, you would have received automated alerts about any publications related to your research interests. You knew this synthesis existed. The implication hangs in the air like poison gas. This wasn't academic rigor or intellectual humility testing. This was a premeditated setup designed to destroy a student's future based on prejudice and lies. The audience processes the revelation in real time. Students exchange horrified glances. Parents of privileged competitors shift uncomfortably, realizing their children were also manipulated as props in an elaborate deception. Bradley Ashworth whispers loud enough to be heard, "She was going to fail all of us just to get rid of him?" Professor Whitman's mouth opens and closes soundlessly, like a fish drowning in air. With news cameras rolling and university administration present, she's trapped between confession and perjury. The literature is extensive. One cannot be expected to monitor every... Her voice trails off into incoherent mumbling. Dr. Rodriguez delivers the final blow. The university will need to investigate how a faculty member could construct a competition based on deliberate misinformation, particularly when that deception appeared designed to eliminate a specific student based on non-academic criteria. Social media explodes again, but this time with righteous fury. Ashkaftai's chemistry scandal begins trending alongside Haichem Genius. The story transforms from feel-good underdog victory to explosive exposé of institutional bias. The revelation doesn't just vindicate Damon. It proves the entire system was rigged from the beginning. What happens when prejudice gets exposed in front of the entire world? The aftermath unfolds like a perfectly orchestrated chemical reaction, each consequence flowing inevitably from what came before. Within 72 hours, Damon receives not just the original scholarship, but a full academic fellowship with research opportunities that most graduate students can only dream of. MIT calls, Stanford calls, Caltech practically begs him to visit their campus. Professor Whitman submits her early retirement papers that same week, her 15-year reign of academic gatekeeping ending not with ceremony but with shame. The investigation reveals a pattern of bias that forces the university to completely overhaul its evaluation processes. But the real magic happens 6 months later. The synthesis route that made Damon famous became the foundation for his first published research paper, a breakthrough in anti-cancer drug development that pharmaceutical companies line up to license. The impossible molecule turns out to hold the key to treating aggressive brain tumors. His younger sister gets into Berkeley on a full scholarship, inspired by watching her brother rewrite the rules of what's possible. Their mother cries happy tears for the first time in years, holding a newspaper article with Damon's photo under the headline, "Community College Student Revolutionizes Cancer Research." The story ripples outward like waves from a stone thrown into still water. Community colleges across the country report surges in chemistry enrollment. Students who'd been told they weren't college material suddenly see new possibilities stretching before them like unexplored territories. Dr. Rodriguez becomes Damon's research mentor, their partnership producing innovations that neither could have achieved alone. She often tells colleagues that teaching him taught her more about chemistry than 30 years of traditional research. The final scene shows Damon at a whiteboard again, but now he's the teacher. His students are diverse faces from backgrounds the old system would have dismissed. Immigrants, first-generation college students, kids from neighborhoods where dreams usually die young. His voice carries the same quiet confidence that stunned a lecture hall that day. Excellence doesn't require permission. It doesn't need the right zip code, connections, or skin color. It just needs opportunity, and the courage to seize that opportunity when everyone expects you to fail. Call to action. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated or seen someone's potential dismissed because of prejudice, share it. Comment below about a time when someone surprised you with their hidden talents. Subscribe to Black Soul Stories to hear more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when given the chance to shine. The future belongs to those brave enough to solve impossible problems.